Around 200 years ago, European archaeologists embarked on a mission to unearth the ancient remnants of what is now the Middle East. They focused their efforts primarily on Egypt and southern Mesopotamia, the region encompassing modern-day Iraq. Their quest was driven by the desire to locate places mentioned in the Bible, as well as in the writings of Greek authors like Tucius and Strabo, and the journals of medieval and Renaissance travelers, such as Benjamin of Tudela and Pedro de la Valle. Names like Babylon and Nineveh were well known, yet their exact locations remained a mystery to Western scholars of the time. By the early 1800s, archaeologists had made significant progress, highlighted by the work of Englishman Claudius James Rich, who mapped the ruins of Babylon and Nineveh. Among his findings were numerous bricks, tablets, clay cylinders, and boundary stones inscribed with mysterious symbols. These inscriptions were not only found in Babylon and Nineveh, but also at other sites, including Persepolis and Benistan in Iran. These sites featured three distinct sets of markings, which scholars soon realized were not mere decorations, but scripts of unknown languages. The decipherment of one of these scripts, which turned out to be Old Persian, paved the way for understanding the other two. The script present at Babylon and Nineveh was identified as Akkadian, often referred to then as Babylonian, while the third script was recognized as Elamite. Although Akkadian is no longer spoken today, it is a Semitic language akin to modern Hebrew and Arabic, and is well understood by linguists and Near Eastern archaeologists. However, in the mid-19th century, an increasing number of scholars began to theorize that the cuneiform script used for Akkadian was not developed by the Semitic-speaking Babylonians and Assyrians, but by another people entirely. Translations of Babylonian texts frequently referenced the land of Sumer and Akkad or king of Sumer and Akkad, indicating that Sumer was a significant place. This raised the question of who the Sumerians were and whether this distinctive script originated from them. Scholars found themselves in a conundrum as they had unknowingly uncovered what some consider the mother civilization of both the Babylonians and Assyrians, now known as the Sumerians. Around 7000 to 6000 BC, people began migrating south along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers into the fertile floodplains of Mesopotamia, which corresponds largely to present-day Iraq and parts of northern Syria. The name Mesopotamia, derived from Greek and meaning land between rivers, aptly describes this region. It was here that early agricultural communities began to flourish on a much larger scale, laying the foundations for the advanced civilizations that would follow. Mesopotamia is characterized by a flat landscape formed by thousands of years of silt deposition from the regular flooding of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This process created extremely rich and fertile soil, ideal for growing crops such as wheat and barley. While small-scale farming had already been established several thousand years earlier in the Near East's Fertile Crescent, which spans from the eastern Mediterranean coast, through the mountains of Turkey and northern Iraq, to the Persian Gulf, it was in Mesopotamia that agriculture truly took root on a grand scale. One of the early farming communities in central Mesopotamia was the Samarra culture, named after the archaeological site of Samarra where it was first discovered. This culture is generally dated to between 6500 and 5500 BC. The Samarra people are known for their distinctive pottery, often decorated with geometric patterns representing natural phenomena. They also constructed irrigation canals to control nearby rivers and streams, enhancing their agricultural productivity. Another prominent culture in the region was the Halif culture, which flourished between 6500 and 5500 BC, though some estimates narrow this period to between 5700 and 5000 BC. Like the Samarra, the Halif people produced distinctive and beautifully crafted ceramics that were widely traded throughout the Fertile Crescent. In exchange, they received goods such as obsidian, bitumen, and seashells. The Halif culture also created some of the earliest examples of stamp seals, highlighting their sophisticated craftsmanship and trade practices. These early Mesopotamian cultures laid the groundwork for the complex societies that would emerge in the region, setting the stage for the development of some of history's earliest and most influential civilizations. Not long after 6000 BC in southern Mesopotamia, significant changes began to unfold, setting the stage for the birth of civilization as we know it. This transformation is closely linked with the people of the Ubaid culture, who occupied the region immediately before the rise of the Sumerians and the establishment of their first cities. The Ubaid culture is named after Tel al-Ubaid, a site not far from what would later become the great Sumerian city of Ur, which also began as a Ubaid settlement. Most scholars date the Ubaid culture to between 5500 and 4000 BC. While the exact origins of the Ubaid people are unknown, it is believed that they were likely migrants from other parts of the Fertile Crescent, seeking new pastures for their flocks and fertile soil for their crops. Most Ubaid sites were small villages, but by the late 5th and early 4th millennium BC, some of these settlements are believed to have grown into towns of nearly 5,000 residents. These early communities cultivated wheat, barley, and lentils, and raised livestock including cattle, goats, and sheep. The typical Ubaid village consisted of several one-story single-family houses, along with a few larger structures and storage facilities for grain and other foodstuffs. Central to many Ubaid sites was a raised earth mound with a small building at its summit, believed to have been an early temple and a precursor to the ziggurats, that would later dominate the skylines of many Mesopotamian cities. Like the Caliph culture, the Ubaid people also traded their unique hand-painted pottery and other crafts such as figurines. Ubaid pottery was highly prized across the region, as evidenced by its presence at multiple sites throughout the Middle East, including Turkey, Iran, Syria, and the southeastern Arabian Peninsula. Much of our understanding of Ubaid culture comes from the ruins of Eridu, a city later famed in Sumerian mythology as the home of the god Enki. Even in antiquity, Eridu was considered an ancient, almost mythical place. For example, the Sumerian king list begins with, "After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu." In Eridu, Alilam became king. He ruled for 28,800 years. Alalga ruled for 36,000 years, two kings ruled for 64,800 years. Then Eridu fell, and the kingship was taken to Bad Tibira. Another Babylonian poem states, "A reed had not come forth, a tree had not been created, a house had not been made, a city had not been made, all the lands were sea, then Eridu was made." Despite these texts being more mythological than historical, later Mesopotamian peoples may have been onto something. Archaeologists have determined that the site of Eridu may have been inhabited as far back as 8000 BC, over 10,000 years ago. During the Ubaid period, Eridu was an ideal place to settle, with ample land suitable for farming and abundant fish from the nearby marshes close to the Persian Gulf. In those days, the shores of what is now the Persian Gulf were much further inland. Such a location may have seemed like a paradise in a dry, barren desert. The local inhabitants may have even believed it was the home of Enki, the god of fresh waters, wisdom, science, technology, and the arts, who was known for his benevolence towards humanity. Enki would become one of the most prominent deities in the Sumerian pantheon. During the Ubaid period, Eridu was still just a small village community with a modest shrine dedicated to Enki. Excavations at Eridu reveal that Enki's sanctuary was initially a small brick room, less than 8 square meters, with an altar at one end and a stand in the center for ritual offerings. Ashes and fish bones discovered at the site suggest that these may have been part of ritual offerings to the god. Some archaeologists believe that the people of Eridu periodically participated in communal feasts that included prayers, singing, and music in honor of Enki. As the town grew, both the temple and the village expanded. By 4500 BC, the temple stood on a platform about a meter high. Over the centuries, the temple continued to expand and elevate, eventually transforming into a step-like pyramid known as a ziggurat. As villages like Eridu grew into prosperous towns, they attracted travelers and merchants. Some visitors came to worship at its temples and sanctuaries, including those dedicated to Enki, making offerings to the god. Many of these travelers brought items from their own villages and towns, which they either donated to the temples or traded for local goods such as barley, sheep, or Eridu's distinctive pottery. A notable example of international trade in Eridu during this time was copper. Copper, a highly useful metal, is not native to southern Mesopotamia and had to be imported from regions as far away as modern-day Oman or Turkey. Remarkably, even during the Ubaid period, artisans in Eridu were forging basic items out of copper. Another imported item, likely from Turkey, was obsidian. The early settlements discussed so far were generally small, with populations of a few hundred people on average, except for larger places like Eridu or Tel Zidane in Syria. During the Ubaid period, these locations may have housed up to 3,000 people at any given time. Few could have predicted that within a millennium, ancient Mesopotamia would witness the rise of a city with a population in the tens of thousands. Less than 200 kilometers northwest of Eridu lies the site of Uruk. Most archaeologists and historians believe that Uruk became the world's first true city sometime during the 4th millennium BC. Although it is impossible to know for the figure of 25,000 residents may not seem impressive by today's standards, especially in the Western world, where it is considered a medium-sized town. However, in the 4th millennium BC, such a population size would have been a monumental urban center. This scale of urbanization was unimaginable to those living in smaller towns like Eridu a few generations earlier. Historians refer to this rapid urban growth in southern Mesopotamia between 4000 and 3100 BC as the Uruk phenomenon or the Uruk period. During this era, it is believed that a group of people, whose exact origins remain unknown, entered the region and integrated with the local Ubaid population, adopting much of their culture and religion. What the Ubaid people call them is uncertain, but these newcomers referred to themselves as Sumerians, meaning the black-headed people, and established their homeland in Sumer. In earlier times, villages were typically governed by a small council of elders, led by a tribal chieftain. However, the rise of cities introduced a more complex societal structure with multiple classes governed by religious, military, and political elites. Although the specifics of early government in Uruk are not fully known, it is believed that the highest authority was a priest-king who held both religious and secular power. Below him were other priests, a few elite or noble families, and then specialized laborers such as artisans, craftsmen, fishermen, farmers, gardeners, and herdsmen. With the advent of writing in later centuries, a class of scribes also emerged. At the bottom of this hierarchy were the slaves. Cities became the centers for mass production of certain objects. While everyday items like pottery and textiles were previously made at home for private use, during the Uruk period, specialized artisans and weavers took over this production. The objects and clothing they created might not have been as ornate as those from earlier periods, but they were well made and functional. An example is the beveled-rimmed bowls discovered in Uruk. Though plain, these bowls were practical and served their purpose. The day-to-day functioning of ancient urban societies required some form of authority to organize tasks, distribute resources, and maintain order. In Uruk, as in other urban areas of the period, this role was fulfilled by religion. Each city had a patron deity who, in theory, lived in the city at a shrine or temple dedicated to them. In Eridu, this deity was the god Enki. In Uruk, the primary deity was the goddess Inanna, although the god Anu also had a significant temple there. The people provided goods to their city's god as a form of tax, typically in the form of wheat, barley, pottery, textiles, or other useful items. These goods were then redistributed to support both the religious and political establishments, and, later, the general population. This system of religiously based governance and resource distribution played a crucial role in the development and maintenance of early urban societies. The organizational structures and cultural practices established during the Uruk period laid the foundations for the complex civilizations that would follow in Mesopotamia and beyond. In most cases, the redistribution of goods and services took place in the city's main temple complex, managed by dedicated priests and priestesses who also performed religious rituals. As cities expanded, the complexity of redistributing resources grew. A variety of goods and numerous professions had to be accounted for, and many people depended on the temple's redistribution system for their survival. To manage this, temple bureaucrats developed an early system of writing around 3300 BC, inscribing information on small clay tablets. This early form of writing, known as proto-cuneiform, primarily consisted of pictographs used to record the transfer of commodities such as grain, beer, and livestock. With over 700 signs, this script was comprehensive, that it likely evolved from an earlier, more primitive system, rather than being created all at once. These early pictographic symbols had relatively simple meanings. For instance, a bull's head represented cattle, while an ear of barley signified barley. Sometimes, the meanings were less straightforward and needed to be interpreted in context with other symbols. For example, a bowl symbol could mean food or bread, but when combined with a human head symbol, it meant to eat. Several centuries later, the pictographic signs were adapted for faster writing using a reed stylus. This new method involved making wedge-shaped impressions into soft clay tablets, a script now known as cuneiform. Once inscribed, the clay tablets were left in the sun to dry and harden, preserving the wedge-shaped impressions. Cuneiform was particularly suited to the Sumerian language, as most Sumerian words are monosyllabic, allowing for a symbol to represent nearly every spoken word. The discovery and translation of cuneiform documents enabled us to understand the lives of ancient Mesopotamians even after thousands of years. In addition to writing, other objects used for communication included cylinder seals. These cylinders, typically made from stone or clay, and occasionally from metal, bone, or ivory, had designs carved into them. When rolled across a slab of wet clay, they created continuous impressions. Cylinder seals were used to seal storerooms, locks, goods, jars, boxes, and baskets. They also served to confirm the identity of the sender, or authorize important documents from individuals in positions of power, such as priests or high-ranking bureaucrats. The influence of the Uruk phenomenon extended beyond southern Mesopotamia, impacting much of the ancient Near East. Between the 4th and 3rd millennia BC, archaeologists have found numerous remains of Uruk-style pottery and architecture at sites in Syria, Iran, and Turkey. It appears that much of this cultural spread was not merely copied from Uruk, but brought to these regions by trading colonies established to acquire raw materials such as copper, obsidian, lead, gold, silver, wood, and stone for construction. Eventually, these colonies also imported tin, essential for making bronze. This extensive trade network and the establishment of trading colonies underscore the far-reaching influence of the Uruk civilization, demonstrating their advanced organizational skills and the pivotal role they played in shaping early urban societies in the ancient Near East. The exact origins of kingship in Mesopotamia are unknown, but the shift from priestly to royal power marked a significant transformation in societal structure. Initially, high-ranking priests held authority, managing the population, collecting taxes, and distributing goods and services. Their power stemmed from their perceived connection to the gods. However, divine favor did not ensure protection from foreign enemies. Priests were not typically warriors or military strategists. As cities expanded and competition for resources intensified, armed conflicts between city-states became common. This created a need for strong leaders capable of commanding in battle, likely giving rise to the first kings among the ancient Mesopotamian population. Initially, kingship may have been a temporary role during wartime, but it soon became a hereditary position. By 2900 BC, kings were prevalent in ancient Sumer, marking the start of the early dynastic period, which lasted nearly 600 years. Rulers had titles such as En, meaning lord, Lujul, meaning governor or local king, and Ensi, denoting more powerful rulers or great kings. For instance, a king ruling multiple cities could be called a Lujul, meaning great man, with several Ensi ruling other cities on his behalf. Most cities were fortified with high walls protecting the temples, administrative buildings, palaces, houses, and the populace. The large step pyramid-like temple, or ziggurat, was the most important structure. It served not only as a place of worship, but also as the terrestrial home of the city's patron god. They were in charge of everything from natural phenomena to household items. For example, there were gods of the sky, sun, and moon, as well as a god of the plow, bricks, and a goddess of writing. Anu was the god of the sky and heavens, with his main temple in Uruk, though Inanna, the goddess of love and war, was its patron deity. Enlil, whose name means Lord Wind, was considered the most powerful deity by the early dynastic period, with his sanctuary in Nippur. Another prominent deity was Enki, the god of fresh water, who was the patron god of Eridu and associated with science and magic. Utu, the god of the sun and justice, was the patron of Sippar and Lhasa, while Nanna, the moon god, was the patron of Ur. Ninjutsu, the patron deity of Lagash, associated with farming and war, had his main temple in Gursu. By 2500 BC, royal inscriptions and portraits of individual kings began to appear, helping piece together the political history of Sumer. One early inscription is of Enetum, ruler of Lagash, 2494 to 2465 BC. A famous limestone relief shows Enetum carrying a basket of clay bricks on his head, performing a religious duty of consecrating and maintaining temples, especially those dedicated to Lagash's patron deity, Ninjutsu. Enetum was also a military leader who waged war with neighboring city-states, such as Ur and Uruk, starting a long-standing rivalry. Early inscriptions were simple, often just the ruler's name on an object, like a stone vessel from 2650 BC reading Enmevarjesi, king of Kish. Some inscriptions offer more detail about Mesopotamian politics. A slightly later one from Kish reads, Mesalam, king of Kish, builder of Ninjutsu's temple, placed this for Ninjutsu. Enlil is the ruler of Lagash. At first glance, the text seems to tell us little more than that Mesalam, king of Kish, built a temple for the god Ninjutsu, and that Enlil is the ruler of Lagash. However, when combined with other documents, we learn that Mesalam, in addition to being the king of Kish, wielded considerable influence over other city-states, such as Lagash and Uruk. He may have even ruled over both cities, although this might be an exaggeration. A later text by King Inmetina of Lagash states, Enlil, king of all the lands and father of all the gods, by his firm command, fixed the border between the kingdom of Lagash and the kingdom of Uruk. Mesalam, king of Kish, at the command of the goddess Inanna, measured the field and set up a boundary stone there. The text literally says that a border was fixed between Ninjutsu and Shara, the patron gods of Lagash and Uruk, respectively. Thus, this conflict was as much between two deities as between two kings and their cities. From the same text by Inmetina, we learn even more about Sumerian political history. It tells us that Ush, the ruler of Uruk, acted aggressively by removing the boundary stone and marching towards Lagash's plain. Ninjutsu, at Enlil's command, made war on Uruk. At Enlil's command, he threw his great battle net over Uruk and heaped up burial mounds on its plain. Inannatum, ruler of Lagash and uncle of Inmetina, fixed the border with Anakala, ruler of Uruk. He extended the boundary from the Nun Canal to the Adena boundary channel, inscribed new boundary stones, and restored the boundary stone of Mesalam. He did not cross into the plain of Uruk. The text also provides specifics about the size of the fields, and tells us that Uruk was forced to pay reparations in the form of a large sum of barley, along with future interest payments. When Uruk was unable to pay, the text recounts that, because he could not repay the barley, Ur, the ruler of Uruk, made irrigation water flow in the boundary channel of Ninjutsu and the boundary channel of Nansh. He torched and tore out the boundary stones, recruited soldiers from foreign lands, and crossed the boundary channel of Ninjutsu. Inmetina, ruler of Lagash, battled with him in Ninjutsu's beloved field. Inmetina, beloved son of Inanna, defeated him. Ur fled, but Inmetina killed him in Uruk. The text continues detailing Uruk's other transgressions against Lagash and its gods. One thing is clear. Lagash and Uruk had a long-standing conflict over the fertile land between them. A famous work of Sumerian art, the Stele of the Vultures, also depicts this conflict in vivid detail. Commissioned by King Enetum of Lagash, Inmetina's predecessor, it portrays a fierce battle over the same area, specifically the fertile fields of Adena, where Lagash emerges victorious over the forces of Uruk. From various texts and monuments, scholars have gradually pieced together the political history of Sumer and other parts of the ancient Near East. However, this is not an easy process. Historians often have to play a complex game of connect the dots, and many questions remain unanswered. For instance, we lack Yuma's perspective on its conflict with Lagash. It's possible that Yuma's leaders had justifiable reasons for violating a treaty that might have been biased against them from the outset. Although Lagash reportedly won several times against its rival, Yuma eventually struck back. Apart from Eridu, Uruk, Kish, Lagash, and Yuma, other significant Sumerian cities included Ur and Nippur. Ur is perhaps the most famous due to its biblical association as the birthplace of Abraham, and the remarkable artifacts unearthed there in the 1920s by archaeologist Sir Charles Leonard Woolley. Ur, like other Sumerian cities, was founded during the early dynastic period and was situated on the banks of the Euphrates River. It was home to Nana, the moon god. Some of the most impressive finds in Ur came from extraordinary tombs dating back to the early dynastic period. Approximately 1,050 burial pits and 17 elaborate tombs were discovered, filled with luxury items such as gold armor, weapons, intricate jewelry, chariots, sculptures, musical instruments, board games, and bowls. Despite dating back to around 2600 BC, these graves remained relatively intact and had evaded grave robbers. The 17 elaborate tombs are believed to have belonged to Ur's ruling class or the royal family. Alongside the king, dozens of attendants and soldiers were buried, likely to accompany him in the afterlife. Whether these attendants and soldiers willingly went to their end or were forced is unknown, as no other similar royal burials have been found in Mesopotamia. Nippur was the most important site for Sumerian religion, housing the Eka, the temple dedicated to Enlil, the supreme god of the Sumerian pantheon. Due to its status as a holy city, Nippur never had a king and remained politically neutral. This did not stop Mesopotamian kings and empire builders from making pilgrimages to Nippur, offering lavish gifts to the Eka, in hopes of receiving divine favor. Like many societies, Sumer experienced increasing social inequality over time, leading to unrest and sometimes revolution. In the 24th century BC, Lagash underwent such turmoil. Once a powerful state under kings like Enetum and Metina, the ruling dynasty was eventually displaced, with a priest named Enantazi coming to power. This move was unprecedented during the early dynastic period, as Lagash's priestly class now controlled both the wealthy temple apparatus and major government institutions. Corruption flourished under Enantazi's successor, Lugalonda, who took control of more than half of Lagash's land holdings and temples. He dismissed opponents, levied heavy taxes on everything, including weddings and funerals, and plunged ordinary people into debt. Some parents were forced to sell their children into slavery to pay off debts. After 6 years of corruption and tyranny, Lugalonda was overthrown by Urukagina, also known as Urunamgina. Urukagina saw himself as a reformer and was known for possibly creating the first known written code of laws. His reforms aimed to curb the excesses of the priestly class and alleviate the burdens on ordinary citizens, making a significant impact on the governance and legal framework of Lagash. It's often stated, though with uncertainty, that Urunamgina created possibly the earliest law code, yet no physical copy has been found. Our knowledge of it comes from references in other documents. One such excerpt describes how Urunamgina prevented the seizure of assets by tax collectors and monopolists. According to the text, when Enlil's foremost warrior granted kingship over Lagash to Urunamgina, he imparted upon him the divine decrees of the past. Urunamgina outlawed the seizure of boats by the boatman's overseer, prohibited the head of shepherds from taking donkeys and sheep, and forbade the fisheries overseer from seizing fisheries for personal gain. It appears Urunamgina aimed to protect the common people. Sadly, his reforms came too late. Lagash's vulnerabilities did not escape notice, particularly from its rival, Umma. In 2341 BC, Alashashid Alza ascended as ruler of Umma. Little is known of his early life, but in his second year as king, he launched an assault on Lagash. Perhaps seeking retribution for centuries of rivalry, Alashashid's forces ravaged and plundered Lagash, including its capital Gursu and sacred sites like the temple of its patron deity, Ninjursu. A lamentation from a Lagash scribe mourns the devastation of their city, invoking curses upon Alashashid and lamenting the destruction of their fields and the desecration against their deity, Ninjursu. Alashashid's actions were viewed as sacrilege, and dire consequences were foretold for him. Alashashid didn't stop with Lagash. He expanded his conquests, claiming dominion over not just Sumer, but also territories stretching from the Lower Sea, the Persian Gulf, to the Upper Sea, the Mediterranean. In a renowned inscription on a vase commissioned by Alashashid himself, he boasted of Enlil granting him kingship over all lands, proclaiming the widespread submission of peoples from the Tigris and Euphrates regions. Allegedly, under his reign, lands rejoiced, and all Sumerian rulers and foreign city-states acknowledged his supremacy. If true, Alashashid would have established one of history's earliest known empires. However, history does not remember him as such, and modern scholars doubt the extent of his actual dominion. His ambitious aspirations were soon challenged by a figure who would eclipse him in legacy and influence: Sargon of Akkad. Sargon, originally an Akkadian whose birth name remains unknown, rose to prominence as a warrior and leader. Known as Sargon the Great, he emerged as a pivotal figure in early antiquity. Unlike Alashashid, who hailed from Sumer, Sargon's origins were in northern Mesopotamia, where the Akkadian language and culture thrived. His rise to power marked a significant shift in Mesopotamian history. Sargon's conquests were swift and decisive. He unified the city-states of Sumer under his rule, and then expanded his authority beyond Sumer to create the Akkadian Empire, the first known multi-ethnic empire in history. His empire stretched from Sumer in the south to parts of Assyria and Elam in the north and east, respectively. Sargon's military campaigns and administrative reforms laid the foundation for centralized governance, setting a precedent for future empires. One of the most enduring achievements of Sargon's reign was his establishment of a bureaucratic administration that governed the empire efficiently. He appointed governors to oversee regions and maintained communication through a network of messengers. Sargon also introduced a standardized system of weights and measures, facilitating trade and commerce across his vast domains. His policies promoted cultural exchange and economic prosperity, fostering a period of relative stability and growth in Mesopotamia. Sargon's legacy extended beyond his military prowess and administrative acumen. He was celebrated in later Mesopotamian literature and royal inscriptions as a legendary figure who transformed the political landscape of the ancient Near East. His dynasty, known as the Akkadian dynasty, continued to rule for several generations after his death, leaving a lasting impact on the region's history and culture. While figures like Ur and Uruk and Alashashid played significant roles in shaping early Mesopotamian history, it was Sargon of Akkad who emerged as the preeminent leader of his time. His achievements in military conquest, statecraft, and empire building laid the groundwork for future civilizations, leaving an indelible mark on the ancient Near East and beyond. The early life of Sargon of Akkad is shrouded in myth and legend, with his true name lost to history. He later adopted the title Sharukinu, meaning legitimate king in Akkadian. According to one legend, his mother, a priestess of the goddess Ishtar, known as Inanna in Sumerian, set him adrift in a basket on the Euphrates River. He was discovered and raised by a gardener, eventually rising to prominence as cupbearer to Ur, the king of Kish. It was during this era that Lugul's Age of Uruk sought to unify the city-states of Sumer under his rule, making Uruk the preeminent power in Mesopotamia. However, Sargon's ambitions and rise to power were swift. Leading a band of followers south from Kish to Uruk, Sargon captured Lugul's Age. According to the Sumerian king list, after Lugul's Age's reign of 25 years, Sargon seized power, ushering in a new era. Sargon himself documented his campaigns in southern Mesopotamia, proudly proclaiming his conquests in ancient inscriptions. He described himself as Sargon, king of Akkad, the one anointed by An, king of the land, governor of Enlil. He boasted of defeating 50 city governors, smiting Uruk, destroying its fortress, and leading its king to the gate of Enlil. He claimed victories over Umar and other city-states, extending his dominion to the shores of the sea. Sargon's conquest of southern Mesopotamia around 2334 BC marked the end of Sumer's early dynastic period. Unlike earlier rulers who boasted of extensive realms, Sargon's empire building was substantiated by historical accounts and archaeological evidence. His conquests were not confined to Sumer alone. Scholars widely accept that Sargon expanded his dominion from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea, establishing one of the world's earliest known empires. The Akkadians, from the region north of Sumer known as Akkad, central and northern Iraq today, were Sargon's people. They coexisted with the Sumerians for centuries, possibly even forming significant populations within Sumerian cities. While the Akkadians lacked a written language before Sargon's time, their language Akkadian belonged to the Eastern Semitic family, akin to Canaanite, Aramaic, and modern Hebrew and Arabic. Sargon's conquest of Sumer brought about profound cultural and administrative changes. He elevated Akkadian as the official language of his empire and adopted the Sumerian script for writing. This shift did not immediately erase Sumerian from daily life, rather, it marked a transition where official documents and state proclamations were henceforth recorded in Akkadian. The Akkadian Empire under Sargon and his successors introduced centralized governance, standardized administrative practices, and a network of officials across their vast domains. Sargon's two sons and his powerful grandson Naram-Sin continued his legacy, expanding and consolidating the empire's influence. However, the lasting impact of the Akkadian conquest was not just political. It catalyzed cultural exchange and integration, leading to a synthesis of Sumerian and Akkadian cultures that shaped the future development of Mesopotamia. Sargon of Akkad stands as a pivotal figure in ancient Near Eastern history. His rise from humble beginnings to the founder of one of the first known empires reshaped the geopolitical landscape of Mesopotamia. By unifying Sumer and establishing the Akkadian Empire, Sargon laid the groundwork for future civilizations and left an enduring legacy that influenced generations to come. His adoption of Akkadian as the administrative language marked a significant cultural shift, underscoring the transformative nature of his reign on Mesopotamian society. Sargon of Akkad, renowned for his rise from humble origins, emphasized his non-noble birth in early autobiographies, likely to enhance his relatability to the common people. His ability to unify and dominate Sumer, the cultural and political heart of Mesopotamia, was unprecedented. Under his banner, Sargon dismantled the traditional Sumerian power structure, challenging the authority of the priesthood, local rulers, and the nobility. In their place, he installed Akkadian governors loyal solely to him. This reshuffle extended to the redistribution of temple lands, previously vital to the priesthood's wealth and influence, now allocated to his loyal supporters. This move significantly curtailed the priesthood's economic and political clout. Sargon strategically placed his daughter Enheduanna as high priestess of the temple complex in Ur, cementing his influence over religious institutions. This was a pivotal move, as Sumerian cities like Ur, Uruk, and Lagash had long been bastions of civilization in the ancient Near East. However, Sargon shifted the political and economic center of gravity when he established his capital, Akkad, or Ubaid, along the Euphrates River. Here, he erected grand palaces and temples dedicated to his patron deities Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, and Zababa, the warrior god of Kish. Akkad became not only the political nerve center, but also the economic hub of the Akkadian Empire. It attracted trade from distant lands like Dilmun, modern Bahrain, and Magan, modern Oman, while caravans from Anatolia, Elam, Arabia, and the Levant converged on its markets. Sargon and his successors reformed the tax system, channeling most revenues directly to Akkad before redistribution across the empire. These reforms, however, came at the expense of Sumerian cities, which saw their once prosperous economies diminish under Akkadian hegemony. Sargon's reign from 2334 to 2279 BC was marked by a firm grip on power. Upon his death, however, the empire faced immediate challenges. Rebellions erupted across Sumer, testing the stability of his successors. His sons, Ramish and Manish-Tushu, struggled to maintain control amidst persistent uprisings. Stability returned briefly under Sargon's grandson, Naram-Sin, who not only stabilized but expanded the Akkadian Empire into new territories. Yet, by the reign of Shah Kali-Shari in 2193 BC, the empire's dominion outside Akkad itself had dwindled. The Sumerian king list paints a picture of tumultuous times, characterized by short reigns and uncertain lineages among subsequent kings. Internal strife and external pressures eventually fractured the empire. Around 2154 BC, the Gutians, a people from the Zagros Mountains, swept in, overthrowing the Akkadian ruler, Shah Kali-Shari, and sacking Akkad itself. While traditionally viewed as the definitive end of the Akkadian Empire, recent studies suggest underlying factors such as severe droughts and famines may have precipitated its collapse. These environmental crises likely exacerbated social unrest and economic instability throughout Mesopotamia, leading to widespread discontent and the disintegration of central authority. Provinces once under Akkadian rule seceded, hastening the empire's demise. In this chaos, opportunistic groups like the Gutians saw a chance to raid and plunder weakened territories. The post-Akkadian era was marked by uncertainty and transition, as former provinces sought autonomy amid shifting alliances and power struggles. Amidst this upheaval, Uruk emerged as a relative bastion of stability, as noted in the Sumerian king list. Its resilience and strategic position likely contributed to its ability to weather the turbulent post-Akkadian period better than other regions of Mesopotamia. The legacy of Sargon of Akkad, despite the empire's eventual collapse, reverberated throughout Mesopotamian history. His reign marked a transformative era, blending Sumerian and Akkadian cultures and establishing precedents in governance and empire building that would influence future civilizations in the region. Following the Akkadian Empire's collapse, Mesopotamia entered a period of turmoil marked by shifting rulers and incursions by foreign groups like the Gutians. The Sumerian king list provides a glimpse into this chaotic era, detailing a succession of short-lived kings and foreign dominion. The Gutians, described as outsiders in Sumerian texts, imposed their rule over the region, although their influence and control over Sumer remain debated among historians due to scant archaeological evidence. The Sumerian king list enumerates a series of rulers during the Gutian dynasty, beginning with Inab, who reigned for a brief 3 years. Following him, several others ruled for similarly short periods, such as Igi, Nanam, Imi, and Elulu, collectively governing for 30 years. The list continues with 21 kings who collectively ruled for 91 years and 40 days, highlighting the instability and turnover in leadership during this period. Among these rulers was a notable figure named Eridu, who, while not mentioned in the Sumerian king list, is attested by statues discovered in Nippur. These artifacts indicate his authority as a king of Gutian and the broader region, known as the Four Quarters. Despite Eridu's presence, archaeological findings suggesting Gutian control over Sumer are limited. It's plausible that Gutian authority may have been restricted to certain urban centers, where they likely maintained garrisons or local officials to oversee tribute collection, rather than direct governance. During the Gutian dynasty, some regions within Sumer, like Lagash, experienced relative prosperity. King Gutian, who ruled around 2141 to 2122 BC, is a notable figure from this time. Renowned for his piety and devotion to the patron deity of Lagash, Ninjursu, Gutian commissioned the construction of numerous temples across his realm. His inscriptions reflect a shift from earlier boastful royal narratives of conquests and enemy defeats to a humbler depiction of a ruler devoted to his people and their gods. Despite any localized prosperity, the Gutians remained outsiders in the eyes of most Sumerians. The Sumerian texts suggest a sentiment of cultural and perhaps ethnic superiority held by the native Sumerians towards the Gutians. This perception likely fueled discontent and resistance against Gutian rule, culminating in efforts by local leaders to reclaim autonomy. One such leader was Utu-Hejul, a local ruler from Uruk who took on the Gutians. According to inscriptions attributed to him, Utu-Hejul mobilized forces to confront the Gutian presence in Sumer. In his appeal to the gods for support, Utu-Hejul sought divine intervention to aid his campaign against the foreigners. The inscriptions vividly describe his preparations and prayers, highlighting the religious and political significance of invoking divine favor in ancient Mesopotamian warfare. In a decisive battle, Utu-Hegel and his forces confronted the Gutians, defeating their king Tirikan, who fled to his stronghold in the Zagros mountains. Despite Tirikan's refuge, the Gutian forces were subdued, and Utu-Hegel restored Sumerian sovereignty. The victory marked the end of Gutian dominance and the beginning of the Fifth Dynasty of Uruk, with Utu-Hegel founding a new era of local rule. The Gutian dynasty represents a period of disruption and uncertainty in ancient Mesopotamia, following the collapse of the Akkadian Empire. The Sumerian king list provides a fragmented account of Gutian rulership, characterized by brief reigns and contested authority over Sumerian city-states. While archaeological evidence supporting Gutian control over Sumer remains sparse, their impact on local governance and political dynamics during this era was significant. Utu-Hegel's victory over the Gutians symbolizes a pivotal moment in Sumerian history, marking the restoration of indigenous rule and the resurgence of city-state autonomy in the region. During the turbulent aftermath of the Gutian rule in ancient Mesopotamia, Utu-Hegel's victory marked a turning point, paving the way for local rulers to assert control over Sumer. One such successor was Ur and Uruk, who inherited the throne around 2112 BC, establishing what historians now term the Third Dynasty of Ur, also known as Ur III, heralding the Neo-Sumerian period. Little is recorded about Ur and Uruk's early years, though he likely played a supportive role alongside Utu-Hegel in his campaign against the Gutians. A pivotal moment in Ur and Uruk's reign was his marriage to Utu-Hegel's daughter, solidifying his legitimacy and possibly securing alliances crucial for his ascension. Upon assuming kingship, Ur and Uruk swiftly moved to consolidate his authority, annexing cities like Lagash and Uruk. In a gesture reminiscent of past Sumerian kings, Ur and Uruk sought to portray himself not merely as a conqueror, but as a benevolent shepherd or father figure to his people. One of Ur and Uruk's most enduring legacies is the Code of Ur and Uruk, widely regarded as one of the earliest legal codes in history, predating the more famous Code of Hammurabi by several centuries. While the original text has not survived intact, fragmented copies provide insights into its content. Consisting of 40 paragraphs, the code covered both civil and criminal offenses, prescribing punishments that ranged from fines to more severe penalties like imprisonment or capital punishment. For instance, fines were levied for offenses such as kidnapping or causing injury in a scuffle, while more severe crimes like murder warranted capital punishment. Ur and Uruk's legal reforms, although relatively mild by modern standards, represented a significant departure from the arbitrary rule characteristic of earlier periods. By establishing clear laws and standardized punishments, Ur and Uruk aimed to foster stability and order within his realm, ensuring justice and accountability among his subjects. Moreover, Ur and Uruk is celebrated for initiating the Sumerian Renaissance, a cultural revival aimed at reclaiming Sumerian identity and heritage after centuries of Akkadian dominance. Unlike his predecessors who promoted the Akkadian language and culture, Ur and Uruk and his descendants elevated Sumerian as the official language of government and patronized Sumerian arts and literature. This cultural renaissance saw the revival and dissemination of ancient Sumerian epics and hymns, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, which were recited in public forums and served as a source of national pride. Under Ur and Uruk's patronage, Sumerian cities flourished with ambitious construction projects and the restoration of iconic monuments. The ziggurat of Ur, one of Mesopotamia's most imposing structures, underwent significant expansion during his reign, reflecting the prosperity and grandeur of the Neo-Sumerian era. Following Ur and Uruk's untimely death, his son-in-law Shulgi ascended to the throne, ushering in a period of unparalleled prosperity and artistic achievement for the Ur III Empire. Shulgi, a charismatic and larger-than-life figure, ascended to divine status in the eyes of many, epitomized in hymns that described him as a heroic prodigy and the divine ruler of all lands. During Shulgi's reign from 2094 to 2047 BC, the Ur III Empire reached its zenith in terms of territorial expansion, economic prosperity, and cultural vibrancy. The empire under Shalgi's rule encompassed vast territories and saw flourishing trade networks that extended beyond Mesopotamia's borders. His administration oversaw the continuation of Ur and Uruk's policies, further promoting Sumerian culture and consolidating the empire's power. Ur and Uruk's reign marked a pivotal period in Mesopotamian history, characterized by legal innovation, cultural resurgence, and territorial consolidation. Through his legal reforms and patronage of Sumerian culture, Ur and Uruk laid the foundation for a prosperous era under the Ur, the Third Dynasty, setting the stage for Shalgi's illustrious rule and the empire's golden age. His legacy endures not only in the artifacts and monuments of ancient Mesopotamia, but also in the enduring influence of his legal code and cultural revival on subsequent civilizations. During the apex of the Third Dynasty of Ur, under the reign of Shalgi, hymns celebrating his divine qualities and leadership were sung across temples and public squares, portraying him as a shepherd-like figure protecting his people. These hymns aimed to instill faith in Shalgi's rule, attributing the empire's prosperity to his divine guidance. However, the true foundation of the Ur, the Third State's success, lay not in divine intervention, but in its highly efficient centralized government, a legacy inherited from the Akkadian rulers. The Third Dynasty of Ur transformed from a regional power into a vast empire, spanning numerous territories and tributary states. Central to this expansion was its adoption of a sophisticated bureaucratic system. This administrative model enabled the Ur, the Third State, to effectively manage its extensive domains, ensuring stability and prosperity across its territories. Historical insights into the inner workings of the Ur, the Third administration are unparalleled in ancient Near Eastern history, due to the discovery and translation of approximately 100,000 clay tablets. These documents offer a comprehensive view of governance, covering a myriad of topics such as economic activities, agriculture, manufacturing, construction, trade, taxation, military affairs, and legal practices. While primarily governmental records, they provide valuable glimpses into the lives of civil servants, farmers, artisans, priests, soldiers, and scribes who constituted the fabric of Ur, the Third society. Taxes in the Ur, the Third Empire were predominantly paid in kind, rather than in precious metals, with provinces contributing goods like grain, livestock, textiles, and pottery to the central government in Ur. To manage the collection efficiently across the empire's vast expanse, a system known as the Bala was implemented. This system staggered tax payments throughout the year, ensuring a steady flow of resources to the treasury without overwhelming the administrative apparatus. Despite domestic stability under kings like Ur and Uruk and Shalgi, military engagements remained integral to the empire's maintenance and expansion. Ur and Uruk met his end in battle against resurgent Gutian forces, underscoring the ongoing military challenges faced by the Ur, the Third State. Shalgi, following his father-in-law's legacy, launched successful campaigns into Elam, bringing cities like Susa and Anshan under Ur, the Third control. His 47-year reign was marked by unparalleled stability, progress, and prosperity, fostering a golden age for Sumer and Mesopotamia. However, upon Shalgi's death in 2047 BC, the empire began to decline precipitously. His successors, lacking his charisma and administrative acumen, struggled to maintain unity and control. The decline initially manifested as provincial rebellions during the reign of Amar-Sin, with several provinces asserting independence from Ur, the Third authority. Concurrently, the influx of Amorite migrants, known in Sumerian as the Matu, further destabilized the empire. The settled and urbanized Sumerians viewed the nomadic Amorites with disdain, considering them uncivilized and disruptive to their established order. Neo-Sumerian texts disparagingly depict the Amorites as outsiders, highlighting tensions between the indigenous population and the newcomers. These cultural clashes and demographic shifts exacerbated existing internal pressures within the Ur, the Third State. The Third Dynasty of Ur under Shalgi represents a remarkable era of administrative sophistication and cultural resurgence in ancient Mesopotamia. While divine hymns praised Shalgi's leadership, the empire's enduring success was grounded in pragmatic governance and effective statecraft. Yet, the empire's decline following Shulgi's reign underscores the complexities of maintaining imperial cohesion amidst external threats and internal dissent. The legacy of the Ur, the Third Dynasty, endures not only in its monumental achievements, but also in its invaluable contributions to governance, law, and cultural identity in the ancient Near East. The Amorites, characterized as people who know no grain, who know no house nor town, were Semitic speakers originating from the Levant. They began migrating into central and southern Mesopotamia during the reign of Shulgi, prompted by various factors such as climate changes, population pressures, or seeking better opportunities in the Fertile Crescent. Shulgi himself attempted to fortify Sumerian territories against these newcomers by commissioning what is believed to be history's first border wall, though it ultimately failed to stem the Amorite influx. By the time of the Third Dynasty of Ur's last king, Ibbi-Sin, around 2004 BC, the Amorites had not only infiltrated Sumer and Akkad, but also established their own settlements and chieftaincies, undermining the central authority of the Ur, the Third State. As the heartland of Sumer faltered, peripheral regions of the empire began asserting independence or falling under Amorite control. In Elam, for instance, Ibbi-Sin's appointed ruler, Ibram, declared autonomy and marched westward to capture the city of Susa. In the midst of this disintegration, a pivotal moment occurred when Ibbi-Sin's son, Ishbi-Erra, led an army from Susa to lay siege to Ur, capturing Ibbi-Sin and effectively ending the Neo-Sumerian Empire. Although the fate of Ibbi-Sin remains uncertain, it is likely he met his demise following his capture. This marked the definitive end of the once glorious Third Dynasty of Ur and ushered in a period of profound cultural and political transformation in Mesopotamia. With the collapse of the Ur, the Third State, many aspects of Sumerian culture and identity began to wane without state support. The decline of Sumerian as both an official and common language accelerated due to the demographic shifts caused by Amorite migrations. These newcomers, whose language was akin to Akkadian, contributed to the fusion of Sumerian and Akkadian cultural elements, paving the way for the emergence of Babylonian civilization. Over the subsequent 2 centuries, Mesopotamia fragmented into smaller kingdoms and city-states, many of which were ruled by various Amorite clans. Akkadian, being closely related to the Amorite language, became more prevalent across Mesopotamia, displacing Sumerian as a spoken language by around 1800 BC. However, Sumerian persisted as a scholarly and religious language, taught in scribal schools for centuries thereafter, preserving its legacy in Mesopotamian culture and scholarship. The contributions of the Sumerians to human civilization are vast and enduring. They pioneered advanced farming techniques, developed tools like the plow, engaged in large-scale urban planning, established systems for mass production of goods such as pottery and textiles, and made significant strides in mathematics, accounting, and the invention of writing. Their innovations laid the foundation for subsequent Mesopotamian civilizations and profoundly influenced the broader development of human society. Exploring Sumerian history, culture, and achievements illuminates a pivotal chapter in human civilization. Their legacy extends beyond their era, influencing later Babylonian and Assyrian societies and leaving an indelible mark on the trajectory of human progress. As we reflect on their accomplishments, we recognize the enduring impact of the Sumerians in shaping our understanding of ancient history and the foundations of modern society. Thank you for following our video. Remember to leave a like, share and subscribe to our channel.